What happens when a beloved NFL wife decides she's had enough of the media circus and finally speaks her truth on live television? Well, you're about to find out. Because what went down between Kylie Kelce and the hosts of Today with Jenna and Friends was nothing short of explosive. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me what you think really happened here. Because trust me, you're going to have some strong opinions by the end of this. The morning started like any other at the Today Show studio. Jenna Bush Hager was settling into her chair alongside her co-hosts, preparing for what was supposed to be a lighthearted segment about family life and supporting spouses in professional sports. Kylie Kelce, wife of Philadelphia Eagles center Jason Kelce, was scheduled as their featured guest to discuss her new children's book and her experiences. Navigating life in the spotlight, we're so excited to have you here today. Kylie, Jenna, began with her trademark warm smile as the cameras rolled. Your book has been getting amazing reviews, and I have to say, as someone who understands the challenges of being in the public eye while raising a family, I really connected with your message. Kylie shifted slightly in her chair, her posture already suggesting this might not go as smoothly as planned. Thank you, Jenna. I appreciate that, though I have to be honest. I'm not sure how much we actually have in common when it comes to being in the public eye. The comment hung in the air for a moment, and you could see Jenna's smile falter just slightly. Her co-host Sarah jumped in to lighten the mood. Well, we're all just trying to do our best as moms, right? That's what really matters. Are we? Though Kylie's voice carried an edge that made everyone in the studio sit up a little straighter. Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like some people get to choose when and how they're in the spotlight, while others have every aspect of their lives dissected without their consent. Jenna's media training kicked in, and she attempted to steer the conversation back on track. That's actually a really interesting point, and it ties into your book beautifully. Can you tell our viewers about the main message you're trying to share with families? The main message, Kylie said, leaning forward slightly, is that authenticity matters more than perfection. But here's what I find fascinating. Jenna, you're asking me about authenticity while we're sitting here pretending that this interview isn't happening because your producers thought it would be great television to have the football wife come on and play nice. The tension in the studio was palpable now. Camera operators exchanged glances, and you could see the production team starting to shift nervously behind the scenes. Jenna's smile was becoming more strained by the second. I'm not sure I understand what you mean by that, Kylie. We invited you here because we genuinely admire your work and wanted to share your story with our audience. My work, Kylie, let out a laugh that didn't carry any humor. Let's be real about what my work actually is, shall we? My work is being Jason Kelce's wife. My work is looking perfectly put together at every game, every public appearance, every charity event. My work is making sure I never say anything too controversial or too honest because, heaven forbid, I reflect poorly on my husband's career or the league. Sarah tried to interject with a gentle laugh. Well, I think a lot of wives can relate to supporting their husbands' careers while maintaining their own identity. Can they, though? Sarah Kylie's eyes flashed. Can they really relate to having photographers follow their children to school? Can they relate to having every outfit choice analyzed online? Can they relate to being reduced to nothing more than a reaction shot during games? Like we're just decorative accessories to the real story. The show's other co-host, Maria, attempted damage control. I think what Sarah meant was that we all face challenges in balancing our personal and professional lives. Your book addresses that beautifully from what I understand. You understand wrong, Kylie said flatly. My book addresses the fact that women like me aren't allowed to have professional lives. We're expected to smile, wave, and be grateful for the opportunity to exist in the shadow of our husband's success, and shows like this perpetuate that narrative. Jenna's composure was beginning to crack. Kylie, I think you might be projecting some frustrations onto us that really aren't fair. We're here to celebrate you and your accomplishments. Celebrate me. Kylie's voice rose slightly. Jenna, you just spent the last 5 minutes trying to relate to me based on your experience as the daughter of a former president and the granddaughter of another former president. Your entire career exists because of your last name, and you want to sit here and tell me you understand what it's like to be defined by someone else's achievements. The studio fell silent except for the hum of cameras and equipment. face flushed red, and for the first time in her broadcasting career, she seemed genuinely at a loss for words. "That's completely unfair and uncalled for," Sarah jumped in, her voice sharp with defensive anger. "Jenna has worked incredibly hard to build her own career and identity separate from her family name, has she though?" Kylie turned her attention to Sarah, because last I checked, she got her first major television job at NBC right after her father became president. "But please, tell me more about how hard she had to work for that opportunity compared to the millions of qualified journalists who didn't have a direct line to the White House." Maria tried desperately to regain control of the interview. "I think we're getting off track here. Let's focus on your book and the positive message you're trying to share with families." "No, let's not," Kylie said firmly. "Let's talk about why you really invited me here. It wasn't because of my book, was it? It was because Travis is dating Taylor Swift, and you thought having his sister-in-law on would be good for ratings. You thought I'd come on here and give you some inside scoop about their relationship, or gush about how wonderful it is to be connected to America's sweetheart." Jenna finally found her voice again, but it was tight with barely controlled frustration. "That is absolutely not why we invited you here, and frankly, I'm insulted that you would suggest otherwise." "Are you insulted, Jenna? Good. Maybe now you know how it feels to have your motives questioned and your integrity challenged on national television." Kylie's voice was steady, but her eyes blazed with years of accumulated frustration. The conversation had spiraled so far from its intended purpose that the producers were frantically trying to figure out how to salvage the segment, but Kylie wasn't finished. "You want to know what's really insulting, Jenna?" Kylie continued, her voice gaining momentum. "What's insulting is sitting here being lectured about fairness by someone who has never had to fight for a single opportunity in her entire life. You've been handed everything on a silver platter, and now you want to act like we're somehow equals in this conversation." The camera caught Jenna's jaw tightening as she struggled to maintain her professional demeanor. "I've worked very hard for everything I've achieved, and I don't appreciate you diminishing that based on assumptions about my background." "Assumptions," Kylie laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "Jenna, your biography is public record. You went from being a school teacher for exactly 2 years to hosting on the Today Show. Most journalists spend decades working their way up through local news, proving themselves at every level, but not you. You got fast-tracked because of who your daddy is." Sarah's face was flushed with anger now. "This is completely inappropriate. Kylie, you came on our show, and now you're attacking Jenna personally. This isn't what our viewers tuned in to see, isn't it though?" Kylie turned to face Sarah directly. "Because I think our viewers are tired of fake conversations and manufactured authenticity. I think they're tired of watching people pretend to relate to struggles they've never actually experienced. And Sarah, since we're being honest here, let's talk about your credentials too." "My credentials are not up for debate," Sarah shot back, her voice rising. "Everything is up for debate when you put yourself on television and claim to represent everyday American families," Kylie replied coolly. "You went to an elite private school, then Columbia University, then law school. Your husband is a successful attorney. You live in a multi-million-dollar home, but you sit here every morning acting like you understand the struggles of working mothers who are trying to pay rent and put food on the table." Maria attempted to interject again, her voice shaking slightly. "Kylie, I think you're being unfair. We all bring our own experiences to this show, and we try our best to connect with our audience authentically." "Authentically," Kylie's eyebrows shot up. "Maria, you just used the word authentically while reading from a teleprompter. Do you? See the irony in that?" The tension in the studio was reaching a breaking point. You could see members of the crew looking at each other uncertainly, and several producers were having heated, whispered conversations behind the cameras. Jenna took a deep breath and made one last attempt to regain control. "Look, Kylie, I understand. That being in the public eye can be challenging, and maybe we haven't always been sensitive to those challenges, but attacking us personally isn't going to solve anything." "You're right, Jenna. Attacking you personally won't solve anything, but maybe calling out the hypocrisy will." Kylie shifted in her chair to face the camera directly. "Do you know what it's like to have your entire identity reduced to your relationship status? To have reporters ask you the same 3 questions at every public appearance. How does it feel to be married to Jason? What's it like being part of the NFL family? Are you excited for the season? She turned back to the hosts. But none of you have ever asked me about my education. None of you have ever asked about my career before marriage. None of you have ever asked about my thoughts on social issues that don't directly relate to football, because in your minds, and in the minds of your viewers, I don't exist as a complete person. That's not true, Jenna protested weakly. Isn't it? Then tell me, Jenna, without looking at your notes, what did I study in college? What was my job before I became Jason's wife? What are my political views? What books have influenced me? What causes do I care about that have nothing to do with sports or children? The silence that followed was deafening. Jenna glanced down at her notes, clearly searching for answers that weren't there. Exactly, Kylie said quietly. You invited me here to talk about a children's book, but you didn't bother to learn anything about the person who wrote it. You see me as Jason Kelce's wife first, Travis Kelce's sister-in-law second. And maybe, if there's time left over, as an individual human being with my own thoughts and experiences. Sarah's voice was defensive now. We have limited time in these segments, Kylie. We can't cover everyone's entire life story. Limited time, Kylie's voice dripped with sarcasm. Sarah, you spent 12 minutes yesterday discussing a celebrity's new hairstyle. You spend entire segments analyzing what politicians' wives wear to events. You have time for what matters to you. This is getting ridiculous, Maria finally snapped. You're being incredibly hostile toward people who invited you onto their platform to promote your work. Hostile. Kylie's eyes flashed dangerously. Maria, you want to see hostile? Hostile is having photographers camp outside your children's school. Hostile is having strangers on the internet critique your parenting based on a 30-second clip they saw on social media. Hostile is being expected to smile and wave while people reduce your entire existence to entertainment value. The conversation had devolved completely, and you could see the panic in the eyes of everyone involved. But Kylie wasn't backing down. You want to know what's really hostile? Having 3 women who have never faced real adversity in their lives sit here and lecture me about how I should be grateful for opportunities I never asked for. You think this is an opportunity? Being here, having this conversation? This is an obligation. This is part of the job description that nobody tells you about when you fall in love with someone in the public eye. Jenna's voice was strained when she finally spoke. I think we need to take a commercial break. No, Kylie said firmly. We're not taking a commercial break. We're going to finish this conversation because for once, someone is telling the truth on daytime television, and your viewers deserve to hear it. The production team was in complete chaos now. Producers were frantically trying to decide whether to cut to commercial, continue rolling, or end the segment entirely. But the cameras kept recording as this unprecedented confrontation continued to unfold. Kylie, we really need to wrap this up, Jenna said, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. This has gone completely off the rails. Has it though, Jenna? Or is this the first time you've had a guest who refused to play the game? Kylie's voice remained steady, but her intensity hadn't diminished at all. You invited me here, expecting me to be grateful and compliant. You expected me to smile pretty for the cameras and give you sound bites you could use for promotional clips. Sarah leaned forward, her frustration boiling over. You know what, Kylie? Maybe the reason people don't ask you about your college education or your career is because you choose to make your husband and your family your public identity. Nobody forced you to attend every game. Nobody forced you to do interviews about being an NFL wife. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and Kylie's expression shifted to something that could only be described as dangerous. Nobody forced me. Kylie's voice was quiet now, which somehow made it even more menacing. Sarah, let me explain something to you about choices. When your husband signs with the NFL, you don't get a handbook that explains how your life is about to change. You don't get a choice about whether photographers will follow you. You don't get a choice about whether your every move will be analyzed and criticized. She paused, letting that sink in before continuing. You get 2 options. You can try to hide from it, which makes you look antisocial and reflects poorly on your husband's image. Or you can participate in it and hope you can maintain some control over the narrative. Those aren't really choices, Sarah. That's damage control. Maria jumped in, clearly hoping to de-escalate. But surely, there are benefits to the lifestyle as well. The The platform you have, the opportunities to do good work. The platform I have. Kylie turned to Maria with a look that could melt steel. Maria, what platform do I have exactly? The platform to smile and wave. The platform to wear the right clothes and say the right things. Because the moment I try to use this so-called platform to express an actual opinion or share a real thought, look what happens. She gestured around the studio, where chaos was still unfolding behind the cameras. This is what happens when women in my position stop performing the role you've assigned us. This is what happens when we refuse to be decorative and start being human. Jenna made one last desperate attempt to salvage the interview. I think there might be some miscommunication here, Kylie. We really do value your perspective and your experiences. Do you, Jenna? Because 5 minutes ago you were trying to relate to my experiences based on your own completely different circumstances, and now that I've called that out, suddenly you value my perspective. Kylie stood up from her chair, and you could feel the entire studio tense up. Here's my perspective. Since you're so interested, my perspective is that shows like this are part of the problem. You create this illusion of relatability while maintaining a safe distance from any real issues. You invite people like me on to perform femininity and family values for your audience. But the moment we step outside those narrow boundaries, you panic. Sarah's voice was sharp with anger. That is completely unfair, and you know it. What I know, Sarah, is that I've been doing interviews like this for years, and not once has anyone asked me a question that challenged me intellectually. Not once has anyone treated me like I might have thoughts worth hearing beyond my opinions. On game day snacks and supporting my husband's career, she looked directly into the camera again. And the really tragic part is that there are thousands of women like me. Women who are intelligent, educated, passionate people who get reduced to their relationships with famous men. Women who have ideas and opinions and experiences that never get shared because everyone assumes we're just pretty accessories to more interesting lives. The studio was completely silent now, except for Kylie's voice. So yes, I wrote a children's book, but I also have a master's degree. I also have strong opinions about education, policy, and women's rights, and social justice. I also have thoughts about literature and art and politics that have nothing to do with my husband or his career. But none of you bothered to ask about any of that because it doesn't fit the narrative you wanted for this segment. Jenna's voice was barely above a whisper. Kylie, I think we should end this interview. Finally, Kylie said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, something we can agree on. But let me be clear about something, Jenna. I'm not ending this interview because you asked me to. I'm ending it because I've said what I came here to say. She looked directly into the camera one final time. To all the women watching this who feel like they've been reduced to someone else's story, you're not alone. And to everyone else, maybe it's time to start asking better questions. With that, Kylie removed her microphone and placed it carefully on the table beside her chair. The gesture was deliberate, final, and unmistakably dismissive. Kylie, please don't leave like this, Maria called out, her voice pleading. But Kylie was already walking away from the interview area, her heels clicking against the studio floor with each determined step. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of her exit, while the three hosts sat in stunned silence. We're going to commercial, Jenna finally managed to say, her voice shaky and uncertain. As the studio lights dimmed and the chaos of the production team erupted around them, it was clear that this wasn't just the end of an interview. It was the end of any pretense that this had gone according to plan. The cameras finally stopped rolling, but the impact of what had just happened was only beginning. Kylie Kelce had walked onto that set as just another NFL wife promoting a children's book. She walked off as something else entirely, someone who had refused to play by the rules that everyone expected her to follow. And that refusal, that moment of authentic rebellion against the role she was supposed to perform, had just been broadcast to millions of viewers who would never look at these kinds of interviews the same way again. So what do you think really motivated Kylie to finally speak her truth that day? Was she right to call out the hosts on their privilege? Or did